Chapter 16. 7:30 a.m., 13th of the Lyric month. The next morning came. Breadwinners left to go to work early in the morning. Adventurers returned from their quests and went to bars or stores to spend their hard-earned money. Informal workers opened their stands to start another day of working. A single man walked down the street carrying bags in his hands. He was wearing different clothes instead of the dark blue suit from yesterday. I hope they're not worried. Even if Arnold was gone for most of the day in the past, he would never miss dinner. Even to him, family time was important. Yesterday, Arnold had taken Lauran to an inn so she could rest. A day had passed since the incident. He had left her in the care of Flora and decided to rent another room for himself. Though, he didn't sleep much. Her wounds were already healed yesterday by the potion Arnold bought, but that wouldn't mean that she'd be ready to head home yet. That potion was a high-class potion, so it was very valuable. Arnold had to carry at least one whenever he was outside. Since Lauran only had a blanket over her body, he couldn't just let her walk around naked, so he bought her some clothes to wear for the time being. It was commoner clothes since they couldn't reach a store in the shopping district. The heat from yesterday hadn't calmed down yet. Arnold didn't consider the possibility that people other than the gangsters might head towards the scene where they commenced their attack. Yesterday, while carrying Lauran on his back, Arnold and Flora had passed by several temple priests who were heading to the scene where everything occurred. Arnold was standing outside the inn. He was going through a few notes he made regarding this world. In his notebook was written, "Levels exist. The plot is somewhat the same as it is in the game. Some things happened earlier than others. I was reborn a few months before the game's Story Hero Expansion DLC officially starts." Still no sign of Arnold's status yet. He stared intently at the last one. Why can't I see Arnold's status yet? Is something preventing me? Is it a glitch? The last one wasn't logical since he wasn't in the game anymore. Somehow he was now living as the villain in Star Fantasy. Everything seemed real. The food he ate. The air he breathed. The feeling of cutting through human flesh was real. Now a bigger question, why was I born as Arnold and not the main character? I'll have to think about this later. Arnold put away the notebook and looked at his hands. He had so many questions that his head began to hurt. Why don't I feel any guilt from killing humans? He didn't kill all of them, so most of them were just knocked out. For some reason he didn't feel bad about killing them with his own hands. They are bad people. They do even worse things to others. I shouldn't feel guilty. They were in the wrong for coming at me with killing intent. He was brainwashing himself at this point. Master Arnold. As Arnold was waiting outside the high-class inn, someone called out to him. Lauran was standing there. "Are you ready to go?" Arnold unfolded his arms and approached Lauran. She nodded and looked down. She fidgeted and stole glances at his face. Aye. When Lauran was about to speak, Arnold held out his hand. In his hand was a stack of documents. "This is..." Lauran's mind blanked when she saw what they were. "All the debt you owe is gone now. There's no need for your family to struggle anymore. I'll personally submit my statement if the Night Order questions your family's involvement of Rudolly and his minions' murder. Even if they were just simple townsfolk, the Night Order would need a scapegoat for this crime of murdering so many people. Otherwise their reputation would crumble if they couldn't even solve this. Lumiala had covered up their tracks, so they shouldn't be involved. On the surface at least. By using his father's name and pressuring the Night Order, Arnold can prevent them from accusing Lauran's parents of holding a grudge and hiring people to slaughter the Felix brothers' gang. Even if he took the documents, some way or another they'd find out. Lauran looked at Arnold with a blank expression. "I'll find someone else to take the fall. My contact, that woman from before, will handle all the paperwork involved in this mess. This is going to be troublesome. Well, I started this mess anyway. We'll need to convince your parents to believe a rival gang took them out. Also, keep your injuries a secret." Arnold, who was talking, realized that Lauran had been quiet all this while. Chem. When he looked at her, he saw that she had lowered her head. Her fists were clenched and shivering by her waist. Did I do something wrong? Shit. Is she mad I killed that guy? Did she want to kill him on her own? He thought of all the things he could have possibly done wrong. However, nothing made sense even after he thought hard. Lauran. When Arnold called her name, Lauran's shoulders shook. He heard a quiet sniffle from her. Is she crying? She wiped her face repeatedly as her head was lowered. "I am sorry for showing such a disgraceful side of me." Even though she said that, more tears came out of her eyes. The two of them gazed at each other. Her eyes were moist and her lips were parted. She smiled. This time, her smile wasn't the sort she made to hide her pain. It was a genuine smile that heightened her exotic beauty. She took a deep breath whilst looking into Arnold's eyes. The sun seemed to glow on her unblemished skin as the wind blew her blood-red hair. Thank you. Almost immediately after, Death Flag has been successfully eliminated. By helping a major character in her quest to rid herself of the demon from her past, affection has increased drastically. Infamy has decreased by 500 points. Current infamy points minus 9,500. Reward star draw 1 use. Archmage's affection level plus 50. Archmage's magic vow. A sudden ring sounded in Arnold's head. When he looked above Lauran's head, he saw a certain box. There, in bold black letters encased in a red rectangle stood. Death Flag evaded. Huh. Arnold's face blanked. It was like the people walking by and the buildings around him were gone. His attention was solely focused on that box. Death Flag, Death Flag. Those words were the final blow. Ha. Lauran tilted her head when she saw Arnold look down. There was a dark shadow over his face. He grabbed Lauran's shoulders. What? Ha. Arnold suddenly burst into maniacal laughter. His eyes were opened wide and his maniacal laugh shook the streets. All of the people looked at him strangely. I eliminated my first Death Flag. It was earlier than he expected. When Liam finished high school, he didn't have time to play the game since he had to go to college. He had no idea how he would even begin to rid himself of the current Death Flags he had. He was thinking of eliminating Olivia's Death Flag first since she was the biggest threat to him at the moment. She must have already come up with ways to kill me by now, he thought. Lauran was only learning her powers after all, so she wasn't anything to be concerned about. Plus, he freed her from slavery and distanced himself from her, so that should have got him enough time. He was uncertain about a lot of things which concerned the game. Although he stayed in contact with his guildmates, they had spoiled the game for him many times in the past. Since Liam only played the story halfway through, he had to research about the game on the internet when he began playing again. There was a special group on a community app that was dedicated to informing players the amount of Death Flags the villain Arnold von Berkley had. Not only was he famous for his talents but his infamy as well. That was how Liam knew of the potential enemies he had to avoid in the future. The list was so long that he got tired of going through all the names. Arnold looked at his hands. They were trembling. Not from fear or anger. Rather, it was excitement. A rather unexpected but welcomed event took place. He could eliminate his Death Flags. Gwahahahaha. Wonderful. Truly marvelous. Arnold put his hand on his face and continued laughing. His back was so bent that one would worry he'd fall over. No one knew what he was talking about. Lauran stepped back after freeing herself from his grip. She looked at Arnold, who was still laughing. His eyes weren't focused. Although his laughter was that of crazy person, tears rolled down his eyes as if he were the happiest person alive. It was behavior befitting a person with his reputation, so Lauran didn't find it weird. It wasn't strange for the trashy heir of the city lord to publicly shame his family. What's all the commotion out here? Flora came out of the inn after giving the keys to the owner. Her hair wasn't purple like before. It was now green. Instead of using the magic item again, Arnold had her buy herself hair dye to change her hair color. The magic item broke during the fight, so they decided to stick with the hair dye. Arnold also told her to buy contacts which made her eyes a honey brown. If it was necessary, they'd have to use other, more drastic means to disguise her. Unless there weren't people who knew of her identity, it was better to stay conspicuous. The rushing priests they passed by yesterday were especially worrisome. There was a high change that they had contact with the theocracy. Mwahahahaha. Arnold continued laughing. What the hell is he doing? Flora nudged Lauran's side. There was a disgusted expression on her face. Unlike the bastard who blackmailed her with a smile on his face and even used her to his own benefit, he looked like any other person belonging in a mental hospital. I am not sure. He suddenly smiled and laughed like that. Lauran answered. Arnold continued laughing even under the gazes of the people. He sank to his knees and clutched his face. His crazy laughter continued. It took a while before he calmed down. On a quiet carriage ride home, there were 3 people sitting in a luxurious carriage on its way to the Berkley mansion. Arnold was silently looking out of the window. He was enjoying the view of the villages out in the distance. As the Duke wanted the city to expand, he began building multiple settlements outside the city. As time passed by, he will slowly connect the settlements with the city, thus expanding it further. It wasn't easy to just take down a castle city's walls. There was a lot to sacrifice. Not only would it be expensive, but the time it would consume would be a lot. Security would also have to be raised since the protective walls would be demolished to expand the city. The city would be likely to be attacked if precautions aren't taken. To Lauran and Flora, Arnold might have looked like he was enjoying the view of his family's city. The truth was, how could I do something so embarrassing? Arnold hated himself for letting his dark past out like that. It reminded him of his high school days. It was exactly that behavior that caused him to remain a virgin in high school. It was so edgy. Why did I laugh like some cheap third-rate villain? He despaired inside. If there was a hole in the ground, then he'd gladly jump into it. As he looked up from his notebook, he noticed that Lauran was looking outside. Her eyes seemed unmoving, as if she was staring into dead space. Even the beautiful scenery outside wasn't sparking any joy. It was obvious that she couldn't forget about yesterday even though she knew the man was dead. Lauran. Yes. How about you take a few days off? I will speak with Victoria when she gets back. Although Sebastian was the head of the servants, he was too busy with other matters, so Victoria was the one Arnold had to talk to about this. That is, I will not take no for an answer. In that condition, you will only cause trouble for our family. What if you make a mistake which affects the relationships between us and our vassals? If she were to get a meeting wrong, for example. A simple mistake would greatly affect the household. That is true. She lowered her head and clenched the folds of her dress. Her red hair was covering her face, but they knew that she was crying. Her continued sniffling was proof of that. Of course, as a man he should have comforted her. However, since the two of them were not in that close of a relationship, it wouldn't matter. Flora was the same. She could only watch as the girl bawled her eyes out. Stop crying for God's sake. Arnold said with feigned annoyance. Don't think a simple thank you will make up for what I had to do to get you out of there. Flora glared at Arnold, however, he only ignored it. She was in a fragile state right now, but his villainous persona was unbreakable. I am sorry. Lauran tried to wipe the tears, however, more came out. Remember that while that store is out of debt, it belongs to me now. I may not be the heir anymore, but my authority still reaches that far. He was thinking of informing his father about buying the building for himself. Of course, since they lost the black status, things would return to normal in the coming weeks. Yes, Lauran only gave her agreement. There was a smile on her face even as she cried. I expect some form of compensation in exchange for what I did. Would you stop it? She's gone through enough. Flora finally spoke up. Why don't you quiet down, slave? Flora clicked her tongue when he called her a slave. I'll make sure to repay Master Arnold's kindness. Even though we have no relation whatsoever, you sacrificed for me. For that, I am truly grateful. Lauran stood up and knelt on the ground. She got into a kneeling position. That was the highest respect one could show to another person. Arnold had always made her do the same thing whilst naked, however, it seemed that she was doing it out of her heart. Even though he thought his act was unbreakable, Arnold was speechless by what she did. Very well. You may stand. Yes. Flora was shaking her head as she watched them. The air turned awkward after Lauran sat down. She lowered her head and kept glancing at Arnold. I guess I don't need to worry about her anymore. Well, at least for now. He was partly worried that Lauran would suffer mentally as she did in the game. She became a love-struck psychopath come genius magic caster in the game. Her whole life was dedicated to magic. Such was her empty life when she finally killed the demon of her past. Not long after she was asked to join the hero party. Needless to say, she too fell for Luke. After their exchange, Flora turned away from Lauran, who seemed to have gained a little color on her complexion. You still haven't told me what it is that you want from me. Chem. Arnold looked up from the notebook. I can see that it isn't my body. So will you tell me what it really is? She stared at Arnold with a serious gaze. I would have liked Luke to be there when I explained. Well, whatever. Arnold put the notebook and pen away in his magic bag. Luke. That kid from yesterday? Arnold nodded. Exactly. I want you to be his master in swordsmanship. Ha! Chapter 17. You want me to teach that little kid swordsmanship? Flora asked to make sure what she heard was right. That is correct. I'm not much of a teacher, you know? Even my master just told me to observe how he fights and learn on my own. How the hell am I supposed to teach a kid? Of course, Arnold already knew that. Flora had never once been taught directly by her master. All she was told to do was observe and do the same things he does. It was like a chef telling his junior to watch him cook and follow the same example. I'm not expecting much from you, anyway. Just see what you're working with. Have a few spars with the kid. With a deep sigh, Flora said, what I see when I look at him is a frightened little animal. Really? Anything else? Not just his scrawny little body, but his eyes tell me that he's not fit for fighting. He has such a timid personality, judging from what I've seen. Usually, there are people like him who have the determination to become a warrior but can't even if they put in the effort. It's like trying to fill a small glass with a lake's volume worth of water. It's impossible. Arnold looked at Flora silently. He tapped his finger on his lip. She didn't seem to be sarcastic, judging by the serious expression on her face. No, the one evaluating Luke wasn't the fallen princess but a future master swordsman. But still, how wrong of a deduction that was, Miss Flora. He was a human chosen by the gods. There was no way he wouldn't be fit for fighting. Not even a level 100 DOP could take Luke down in the game. Even the top guild couldn't beat the hero even if all of them attacked him at once. After hearing that on the community, Liam, along with the rest of his guild members, decided to not mess with the hero either. He was destined to be a broken cheat anyway. Even if the bosses he slayed dropped epic loot, it wasn't worth it to fight the hero over it. TSK, TSK. Arnold shook his head in disappointment. What? You saying you know better? Not really. I developed my own style of swordsmanship, so I can't assess Luke like you can. I trained myself without using textbook methods, so other than teaching him correct posture, I can't do much else. What do you mean? Arnold began explaining to Flora about his journey as a swordsman. No instructor could teach Arnold how to fight with a sword. This had been the case ever since he had been a young boy. None of the textbook styles suited him. Not even the knights from the Imperial Palace could help Arnold. He was known as an irregular. His aura pool was massive, yet he couldn't use it effectively. This had all happened before Arnold was regarded as a prodigy of this generation. But then, he managed to create his own style of swordsmanship. That was what made everyone call him a genius of his age group. That swordsmanship style was flow of the tide sword style. It was a style of swordsmanship that combined the ferociousness of the speed of sound and the flow of a gentle river. That was why Arnold could cut everything his sword touches so cleanly. Flora looked at Arnold in shock when she heard him. She looked at Lauran next. Is that true? He made his own sword style? Yes. But I have only heard this from others since I'm not well versed in swordsmanship. To me, all forms look the same. Lauran answered so. She was a magic caster, so it was obvious that she wouldn't know the difference. Flora's mouth was opened wide. That's amazing. Even my master had to train for years to make his own swordsmanship, she muttered. Come again. Nothing. Ahem. Very well then. I shall teach Luke the way of the sword. Arnold nodded in satisfaction. I will take care of Miss Flora's lodging. One of the guest rooms ought to be free. Lauran said. That isn't necessary, Miss Lauran. You need to rest. Flora replied in a fluster. But, Lauran. Arnold looked at her, who was still pushing the matter. You are the heir's head servant. In the state you're in now, you'll just get in the way. Did I not just finish this discussion with you? That's right. Lauran knocked her forehead. Keeping her here was the right choice. Great job past me. He didn't know what kind of trouble Lauran would get mixed into if she didn't continue working at the castle. At least this way Luke could watch her. I'll get one of the other maids to attend to you. Be grateful for my sincere generosity, slave. Can you stop calling me that? The carriage suddenly came to a halt. They had arrived later than expected. Chem. Why is the coachman not opening the door? Lauran leaned her head out. Why aren't you allowing me entry? The coachman approached the guard knight beside the gate. I apologize, but Lord Arnold must head to the castle as soon as possible. Lord Sebastian ordered us to protect the mansion before he left. The mistresses are still here, but the rest of the family have headed to the castle. Why? What? I should head to the castle? The mansion that Arnold had been staying at recently wasn't the family's main residence. It was mainly a second residence for the entire family. One could call it a vacation home. Then again, the second wife Judith was the one who told Marcus that he should build a second house for them. He was reluctant at first but changed his mind afterwards since he knew that his two wives would always go at each other's throats. To ease the tension the two may have, he decided that Judith and Jack must live at the mansion. Outside, on the same estate stood an annex building where the other mistresses lived. It was rare for the entire family to sit at the same table. Just like yesterday. Maybe the reason Arnold and the rest of the family was there at the manor that day was because Marcus ordered them to stay there. He must have kept Luke at the castle during that time. No wonder he found it odd that he woke up in the manor. The knight answered the bewildered coachman. His Grace has been called to the imperial capital. A confused expression appeared on Arnold's face, followed by his face hardening. Flora noticed his behavior. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing." "What?" "I must head to the castle at once. Hurry. The Duke won't delay his departure any longer." Chances were that he could die if this sudden was an order for him to go into battle. He probably wanted to see his family one last time. When did the message arrive? Yesterday morning after Lord Arnold left. One of the court officials delivered it. Everyone has vacated the mansion and went to see him off by giving him a formal farewell. It was rare for the emperor himself to summon all the great nobles. One could conclude that whatever they were needed for was serious. The main reason why Marcus went to the castle was probably because he went to fetch his war weapon. His Grace is... Lauran looked at Arnold after sticking her head back in and sitting down. "Heading off to war." Arnold finished her sentence. Perhaps not in the literal sense. That was the conclusion they came up with. Since the messenger himself didn't say why the Duke was called, they could only assume the worst. Arnold leaned out of the window. "Let's go to the castle. Now." "Why yes." The coachman hurriedly jumped onto the carriage and flipped the reins. They raced through the city to get to the center where the castle was located. Their mansion was like any other mansion in the noble district, so there was nothing special to it. The castle, however, was an entirely different matter. "It's humongous," Arnold thought when he looked out the window. In his line of sight was a defensive fortress that stood majestically in the center of the city. Two flags were on either side of the castle gates. The flags had a painting of the legendary beast, the golden lion within its crest. Many more knights were stationed around the perimeter. "Has the Duke left yet?" the coachman asked hurriedly when they arrived at the gate. The knight pointed to the courtyard. "We are getting ready to send him off. Our private army is standing by on the lawn. I must take Lord Arnold at once." The coachman flipped the reins and entered the castle gates. "Must I fetch you clean clothes?" Lauran asked. "No. Just go rest," Arnold answered while gazing out of the window. "Really? Stop being so eager to work." "I understand, thank you very much." He didn't do anything worthy of her gratitude at that moment. Maybe she was thanking him for saving her. Arnold glanced at Lauran, albeit briefly. Why is she looking at me like that? He didn't know why, but her eyes looked at him warmly. Much more different than in the past. He always had to look at a stone-faced Lauran gazing at him with eyes of a murderer. That Lauran was nowhere to be found. Arnold decided to ignore her change of behavior. He didn't care what she thought of him as long as she was safe and by Luke's side. "I will get off first." Lauran exited the carriage after it stopped. She jogged inside the castle after greeting the other servants. Of course, she used the back door. I can hear many more people arriving to say farewell to father. They got hold of the news quick, Arnold and Flora also got off the carriage. In his line of sight, Arnold could see multiple servants, knights, vassals, and other personnel standing by. All of them gazed at Arnold. Although Arnold didn't even acknowledge them. That was an extremely rude thing to do. Many of them glared at him as he ignored them. "She seems much better than before." Flora suddenly spoke. "What do you mean?" "Last night before she drifted off to sleep, she told me all the horrible things she had to go through because of you. The suffering she had to endure, things like that." Arnold remained silent as they neared the front door. Yet, somehow she's smiling genuinely. It's like she is free of her demons now. Arnold didn't respond and only grunted. You gave her that. It would have been romantic if the person who saved her wasn't you, though. Flora suddenly stopped. Her. You're not going with me? This is a family matter which I am not a part of. I'll wait outside. All right. Arnold didn't persuade her to enter with him. He left her and headed inside. Father. Arnold was about to kneel, however, Marcus grabbed his shoulder. Arnold. Yes. Everyone else watched their exchange in silence. The Duke was dressed in his imperial general uniform. On his chest, there were 9 stars. That was to acknowledge that he was a powerhouse of the nation. Around him stood Adriana, Judith holding Thomas, Jack, Anna, Melina, and Luke. His most trusted vassals were also standing there, Baron Eucane, Viscount Repunic, Count Gregoric, and Earl Lauran, Grace's father. All of them had hardened expressions on their faces. While I'm gone, I want you and Luke to look after the castle in my place. Your mother will stay here and handle the management of the city with my most trusted aides. Sebastian will aid your mother, so he will stay here as well. Marcus left the company of his vassals and went into a corner to speak with Arnold. There was uneasiness in his son's eyes. Do not worry. Whatever it is that my old friend wants me to do, I will be sure to return alive. There was zero confidence in his voice. Whatever Jernic, the Emperor wanted him to do was probably not an easy task. There wasn't any sort of event that explained the Duke's departure, was there? Earl tried to rack his brains to try and remember. His father turned around to everyone in the great hall. He adjusted his tie and took out his glorious spear, Thunder. Arnold had seen it for the first time in his life. It was a spear that was forged from the lightning bolt of a god who wished to punish this world but instead was defeated by his own creation. It was only a myth, but some believed it to be true. When the Duke wielded this spear, he was the definition of a thunder god of the spear arts. Much like Arnold, who created his own sword style, the Duke created his own martial art. With thunder in my grasp, there is no need for me to fear my demise. If I do, however, meet an enemy who even I cannot hope to defeat alone, then I shall rely on the help of the knights I personally trained. They, who I raised with my own hands. The ground rumbled at that moment. The knights outside had heard their lord's words and couldn't help but be overjoyed. Since the Emperor had called for his arrival to the capital, it was common sense to take his strongest knights in case there was a need for extra manpower. The other 3 great nobles probably thought of the same thing, Arnold thought. As the Duke of this empire, I will surely return to resume my duties. At his father's words, Arnold stepped aside. He was hoping to persuade his father not to go since he wasn't sure what was going on. There was no telling what dangers his father could be exposed to because of this unknown event. Then again, even if he did try and stop his father, there was little chance of success. Once Marcus made up his mind, few things could change it. Be safe, dear. Adriana approached Marcus and planted a kiss on his cheek. He nodded. Take care of the family for me while I'm gone. Marcus looked out of the door at the knights gathered in formation. Come, my knights. We must make haste. Ooh. The knights got ready to move out at his calling. Marcus looked back at his family one last time before walking out of the door. His vassals followed close behind. They bade the family farewell. Arnold watched in silence from the front door as his father marched with his men. He wasn't looking at the departing back of his father now, but a great noble of the empire.
Chapter 18. Part 1. Arnold went to his room after telling his mother that he didn't want breakfast. He was a little tired from expending so much aura yesterday, so he said that he would take a nap. His mother seemed keen on telling him something, but she didn't push the matter. Arnold took off his shirt and his shoes and laid down in his bed. It wasn't as soft as his former room's bed, which was fit for the heir, but he could bear with it. There was something he was concerned about. His status. Why couldn't he see it? He had tried numerous times by now. That said, all he did was shout status or think of the word. Arnold stared blankly at the ceiling. He had one hypothesis as to why. He wasn't sure if it was true since he had no way of testing it out. In Star Fantasy, there were items called level measuring rune stones. Granted, they could only measure people who are level 40 and lower. Anything above that would not show on the system. Then again, it only measured a person's level and not their stats in numerical value. That was why the players hated it. To view someone's level above 40, you must use a guild or academy exclusive runestone. The developers updated the game and added status to a player's menu screen. That was what separated NPCs from players. They had a menu from where you could see in detail how strong they were. As for NPCs, well, they could only use runestones. It wasn't like their brains could calculate their overall stats. In fact, the fact that he even thought he had a status before taking into account that he wasn't a player was stupid. In the game, Liam could only press a button, then his status would come up in the form of a box. There was a bit of a problem there, however. Arnold von Berkley wasn't a player but an inhabitant of this world. I thought that since this is a game, I can conveniently call my status. Fuck, I'm stupid. I should have realized this the moment I questioned this reality. He felt ashamed of not even considering that possibility at first. The possibility was big that he didn't even have a status similar to a player. To put it into simple terms, the characters of the game were vastly different from a player. For example, never once had he heard one of them mention something about their HP or MP+, potions didn't work as it did in the game. There was no green light that embraced a person's body completely and acquire that rang out. Well, I should just head to the guild to check my level then. Magic academies, towers and various guilds make use of a runestone to measure a person's level potential. It's not available for public use, though. If Arnold wanted to measure his level, then he'd have to join the guild by registering. He doubted whether the guild would accept him. It was obvious why. This is troublesome. Maybe I should disguise myself as another person. If he were to become an adventurer, then he'd be able to travel vast distances. He wasn't worried about city management since he already had a few people in mind that could help with that in his absence. Victoria was one of those people. I'm pretty sure there's another appearance-altering item somewhere in the magic item treasury. Since this was a huge castle, there ought to have been such a thing. Arnold remembered that one of the previous heads loved to collect magic tools and items. I should head down to the basement once I finish with dinner. Since he had to find out on his own if other players stayed in this world, he had to disguise himself. If he were to tell those people that Arnold was a player, then he'd be eliminated. He was a mid-endgame boss after all. Wouldn't it be better to kill him now instead of waiting until he became a Dragon Lord rank threat? It was much too troublesome to wait. No one had the opportunity to kill him in the original game since there was never a story to follow. They didn't even know that Arnold was important until they actually had to face him. It was only after the Hero DLC expansion came out that the game truly had a plot to follow. It was an entirely new game after that. What was once a popular MMORPG turned into a hit RPG with a story. That made people love it even more. They could explore a new world and see it through the eyes of the hero. Of course, Arnold only became a part of the story much later since the player controlled Luke when he was still young. There wasn't much to do besides basic things. You could hunt, fish, travel the nation, etc. It was important for players to learn more about Luke's background, after all. He was a war orphan since his parents died during an assault from an enemy nation. His father was forced to join the Empire's army. His mother committed suicide not much later. He found her corpse lying in the kitchen one day when he returned from playing at Non's house. It was that day when Luke repelled those bandits that the story truly began. Many found the early gameplay before the encounter with the bandits boring and unnecessary. They hated how the game shifted from fantasy to slice of life. That said, wasn't the purpose of the DLC to watch the hero grow into what he was in the original game? The hero was described as a strong, kind and brave soul who could slay any threat with a flick of his holy sword. Then there was his archnemesis, the Demon King. The complete opposite. Why is it that I was born as the villain and not the hero? Something isn't adding up. Liam much rather preferred being reborn as a side character than the villain of the story. It wasn't obvious now, but there would arrive many people who wanted to kill Arnold. Everywhere he went, trouble followed. He only wanted to find other players and why he was summoned to this world. Was that too much to ask for? Later that day when evening came, everyone who was in the dining room ate in silence. That was understandable since the head seat was empty. They had said farewell to the patriarch earlier today. In the worst case, it might have been their last farewell. Al, are you going to continue attending the academy when it reopens for the new semester? The first one who spoke up was his mother. Arnold sighed. He completely forgot that he was still a student at the academy. Yes, mother. I'll stop skipping classes from now on. I know it's important to finish my education. Didn't you say the same thing last time? Anna looked at him in suspicion. You're only saying that because you want mom off your back. In the past, Arnold had acted like a delinquent who never attended any of his classes. He didn't even respect the teachers. One would assume that the only reason he even attended the academy was to take the female students to bed. As Arnold said, getting an education was important. If he failed as a city lord, then he could just travel across the continent to another nation and become a knight or bureaucrat. Then again, he would travel the continent regardless since he couldn't just remain in one location. That was after he finds suitable and competent people to manage the city in his absence. If worst came to worst, then he could just become an adventurer. Arnold knew that his parents wouldn't mind letting him stay here. But that wasn't what he wanted. He was a modern-day person obsessed with fantasy. He would much rather become an adventurer. That was because he could travel more and learn about this new world. Lokinge Castle City wasn't as he remembered it in the game. Even after the DLC, everything looked completely different. Not just that, the system of this world was also different. In Star Fantasy, if one was a player, you could simply walk up to any NPC or player and view their level above their heads. No matter how many times Arnold tried, nothing worked. He held on to the theory that it was because he wasn't a player. I doubt I can figure this out on my own, Arnold thought. If only Alex was around. She's smarter than I am, after all. Well, I doubt she'd reveal herself so easily. That counted for all of his guild mates. Liam was the wise guild master, yet there were many in the guild who were smarter than he was. When he confronted Alex why she had dueled with him and asked him to join her, she said, "Experience in the game is much more important to me. It can either be a weapon or a curse. I believe you are the former." Liam felt nostalgic over the memory of his beloved friend. Just once. I wanted to see her real face just once, he thought. I will be going to the capital in a few days. I can't leave your father alone for too long. Adriana looked at all the members gathered at the table. That said, Judith and Jack wasn't present since the former decided to eat in their room. He's a grown man, Mom. Why worry about him this much? Anna sighed as if she expected her mother to react this way. But still, I don't want your father to end up like last time. All of you remember, right? That day he came home with a hole in his chest. It was a bitter memory. Marcus was severely injured, yet he smiled in satisfaction. I met a truly amazing warrior. It was during a war with another nation. Marcus had fought a life-or-death battle against a renowned warrior. Of course, this was many years ago, so there was no doubt that he was much stronger now. The Duke wouldn't lose so easily if they were to cross swords again. If anyone can take father down, then it would be another powerhouse. Didn't he leave the city in your hands while he was away? Anna said. Very right, but Adriana still looked uncertain about what was the correct thing to do. Both were very important choices. Assist her husband, or take care of the city in his place. In the end, she decided to stay. Although she was very worried, she had to believe that her husband could come back home alive. Her worry would be an insult to his resolve. Silence descended upon the room as if no one else had anything to say. Anna sensed the gloomy mood in the air and decided to speak. So, you mentioned something about finding people on your own to help you manage Whitech City. Although it is a very small city, the tasks and funds needed to operate it will be the same as any other city. I'm curious as well. Where have you found the time to find such individuals? Sebastian, who was pouring wine in Adriana's glass, looked at Arnold skeptically. Master Marcus seems to trust your judgment. However, I am in doubt. Arnold put down his utensils. I know where one of those people are. However, I must still search for the others. And who is that person? Asked Anna. He manages a small merchant firm in our city, mother. I'm sure you've heard of the Reincarnated. The family of merchants. They built stores across the entire continent. The patriarch owns the Merchant Guild's HQ in Musgun province. Right. Well, I'm recruiting the eldest son as my subordinate. He will be in charge of supply routes, the city's market department, and production. That's a little too much responsibility for one person. Anna said in doubt. There's a worry over his skills as well. Wasn't he kicked out of the guild after he failed to land a deal with a bigwig in sugar production? You're wrong, my dear sister. He left on his own. It wasn't that he failed to secure the deal, it was more like he had no intention of proceeding with the deal. The Reincarnated merchant family won't stay on top of the finance world, and he could see that as well. It wasn't like he knew the future events like Arnold did. More like, he calculated all the outcomes if he were to stay in the family business. All of it pointed to the family falling into ruin. Rain will be all I need to make sure my city earns revenue and has enough resources if we are to accept more citizens in the future. Plus, I know he'll make the right judgment when it comes to the prices of the blood crystals. I need to be careful as to how I tell him about them. Then again, if he ran off with the crystals, then Arnold would just kill him. I'll leave those matters to my subordinates. All I want is the land near Whitech City so I can become wealthy. It couldn't be stressed enough that Liam was not smart at all, so he had to find the capable people to work under him. Of course, by any means necessary. Plus, original Arnold's specialty lay in stuff like deception and manipulation. Managing a city wasn't his strong suits. I should find him before I depart to the city. Tomorrow was the time of the raid. He was interested in watching the adventurers fight the dragon, assuming there was one. Of course, he would wear the appropriate gear a novice adventurer should have. Nothing brought more trouble to oneself than equipping yourself with expensive and strong items and weapons. Mother, may I have the treasury vault's key? For what purpose? Adriana narrowed her eyes. I wanted to borrow a magic item for a while. It won't be anything extravagant. Adriana nodded after looking at his face. It seemed that he wasn't lying. Don't steal money again just so you can buy an entire stock's worth of ale like last time. Arnold, you bastard. How low can you get? Liam grimaced at Arnold's shameful behavior. Why was he so obsessed with alcohol? Have any of you seen Victoria? Arnold hadn't seen her ever since yesterday. Well, he wasn't here all day, but she would usually come look for him near the bars in the city. She had an urgent matter to attend to. I think she may take a while. In the meantime, I shall appoint one of the other maids to serve you. Sebastian answered expressionlessly. Ah, I see. He was a little disheartened. He wanted to see Victoria again, but it was a pity. Dinner ended shortly after. It was a rather quiet dinner. Melina, who usually spoke the most during dinner time, was silently being led by Anna to her room by hand. Adriana said a few words to Sebastian before she left to go to the office. Arnold headed down to the treasury, accompanied by a servant, of course. Luke also left to go to his assigned room. Once everyone left the dining room, the castle was bathed in silence except for the occasional guards walking in the corridors. Part 2. The castle was pitch black. Occasionally, there would be light sources going to and fro. It was the knights who were tasked with protecting the castle. The night duty maids would also walk around the castle, however, they stayed idle in front of everyone's rooms most of the time. Luke couldn't sleep, so he sneaked out of his room while the night duty maid was snoozing in the chair next to his door. Is it really necessary for all of them to sit in front of our rooms all night? He didn't understand noble society at all. After tiptoeing down the stairs, Luke took a right. He avoided the soldier who was walking down the hallway. Is Miss Adriana still in the office? He wanted to speak with her, but didn't find an opportunity to. Of course, this time of the night was very inconvenient for any person to be meeting up with another. Adriana had been the one who told him to come see her if he needed anything, so Luke wanted to take her up on her offer. Luke arrived at a certain room. It was a very exquisite-looking door that was dissimilar to the other doors of this castle. He knocked and said, Miss Adriana, it's Luke. May I come in? Enter. Luke entered the office after sighing in relief. Since the Duke left her in charge, she was allowed inside his office, which was off limits most of the time. Luke, why are you still awake? It's almost midnight. Adriana took off her glasses and put her pen down. Can I ask you something, ma'am? Of course. My mind is a bit groggy, but I'll try and answer whatever question you have. She's really kind. I thought she'd yell at me. I feel like Miss Judith would definitely yell at me. He remembered that bombshell goddess with a god complex who bossed everyone around. It was extremely rude to describe her in such a manner, however, he couldn't help it. Luke's gaze swam around the office. It seems that you're finding it difficult, HM? Don't worry. I won't bite. Like I said in the past, I'm here to help. Alright, after Luke looked back at Adriana, his lips parted and he spoke. Why did Mr. Marcus pick me and discard Big Brother? He wanted to ask Marcus, but said person wasn't present. Why, huh? Adriana closed her eyes. Tell me, have you ever asked what the servants think of Al? Huh? Well, they say a lot of bad things about him. Exactly. But that doesn't explain why I was the one to be chosen as the heir. I mean, Big Brother is more than capable. Adriana smiled in response to his words. That's all he is. Capable. But who would be happy with that? There had been a rumor going around that many nobles will pull their support if Al was ever given the seat of head. A noble must not just have the skills to take care of their household but also the charisma that makes connections and build good relationships. You see, unlike Arnold, you can be raised to become the ideal heir. You're still young after all. Luke sat silently. It might take a few years, but it'll be worth it once we are done teaching you everything you need to know. Now tell me, Luke, why did you agree to become the heir? You could have said no, you know. It's because Mr. Marcus said that he'll give my family a better life than we have now. I see. And how did you grow up? Poor? Not always enough to eat every day? There's never enough to buy new clothes, things like that. Adriana had gone through the papers of the village Luke was born in. It was a harsh living environment where few crops could grow. It was only a few years ago that the village was able to stabilize after Marcus decided to buy their land from the previous fief lord. Yes. But you were happy with that life regardless, weren't you? You want to give back to the person who raised you. Luke nodded again. Then why hesitate? Are you worried about Earl? He lowered his head even further and nodded again. Although he doesn't show it, I think he hates me. Adriana laughed. I suspected it as such. But, what can he do? What will complaining about it change? It will only further bring shame to our faces. Nobles are hard-headed and prideful. I doubt anyone will approve of him even if he were to change his ways, which is probably impossible. If viewed from a different perspective, this was better for the household. Arnold wasn't liked in the noble circle. Chances were that the nobles who had supported the growth of the Berkley household would pull out once he was made the head. No, Adriana knew that they would definitely pull their support. He would have brought disaster to both himself and the aristocracy. Then there was Luke. He could be raised into the ideal head for the household. Once Marcus returned, then they'd begin his studies to become a city lord. Perhaps in a decade or so, he would become the perfect patriarch once Marcus stepped down. Many of our vassals have agreed to my husband's decision. Your power plays a big part as well in the decision. My power? Luke tilted his head. You must not have heard of golden aura? It is proof that the gods are looking upon you in a favorable light. Many who have been born with golden aura have achieved great things. There is a famous story of a knight who stopped the assault of an entire nation to stop them from crossing his kingdom's borders. Many children and renowned warriors alike aspire to become like that great man. Adriana chuckled as a gentle light gleamed in her eyes. That includes my husband. Ah, really? Adriana pointed to the right. On the wall, to her right, was a painting of a man who adorned white armor and rode a dragon. His lifted right arm was holding something. A sword covered in golden aura. On his left arm was a golden shield as well. That is Prometheus, the Sanctity Knight. Just by looking at the painting, Luke could tell. He was a great man. He hopes that you can become that man, Luke. Adriana said gently. If you're still hesitating, well. No, Luke hurriedly shook his head. Maybe it was Adriana's imagination, but she could see a fire as great as the breath of a dragon lord blaze within his eyes. I will become the next duke. A smile appeared on Adriana's beautiful face. Chapter 19. Lord Lancelot. H.M. In the branch Holy Church of Melis, a priest barged into the office of a certain man. Specifically, he was known as a heretical inquisitor. Lancelot, the highest-ranking member of this branch. He had just started his first year as a high official after being promoted by the Pope. There were two weapons hanging on the wall behind him. They were proof of the trust the theocracy had towards him. The two divine star-class swords, praise and worship. The swords were acquired from an ancient relic tomb located somewhere in the snowy mountains ruled by dragons. Being a dual swordsman, it was the perfect pair of weapons for one such as Lancelot. Lancelot had received his own branch after his promotion, so he was the head of office in this section of the capital of the Holy Arziel Empire. Behind the desk was a young adult man with blonde hair and green eyes. Lancelot's handsome features could even be seen under the low light of the setting sun. The light gave him a sort of elegant glow. "What is the meaning of this, priest? I will cut off your head if you intend to waste my time. I humbly apologize for bothering you. However, this is an emergency." The priest shouted and knelt. "We have heard from one of our branches that they saw someone resembling Flora Luthiel of the fallen Luthiel kingdom. I finished speaking with a fellow priest a few minutes ago." That name made Lancelot finally look at the man. "Continue." "Yes. Looking at the information we received, it seems that she was walking alongside another individual who wore a mask. The two massacred an entire gang." The priest was reading from a piece of paper. It seemed he made notes during his call with the other priest. "Any survivors?" "Unfortunately, no. Either some managed to escape undetected or all of them died. As of now, we don't know what their objective was. They caused such a ruckus that the temple priests stationed in the city immediately headed towards the scene to heal anyone who was wounded. Said priests had informed the church in the holy city about who they saw. They were on their way to the scene when they saw two individuals walk down the same street as them. One was carrying a person who was covered up by a blanket. The other one was a female who matched the description of the purple-haired princess. Flora's magic item had broken since she was fighting. Of course, she tried to stay inconspicuous as much as possible. In the end, however, she failed to hide her identity." The priest finished explaining and timidly looked up. His entire body shivered when he saw Lancelot's expression. Although his face was as expressionless as always, there was a certain shadow which added an air of malice around him. The pressure from his superior vanished a moment later. "You couldn't locate where she is currently residing?" Lancelot leaned back in his seat. "Indeed. All we know about that woman is that she was being accompanied by a strange swordsman. Traces of aura was found inside a certain bedroom where a headless corpse laid. Said aura was used to completely destroy a large chunk of the mansion. I am currently waiting for the priests to send us a sample." "A headless corpse, huh? It seems that she has an accomplice in her killing sprees. We have lost too many men from the day we invaded the Luthiel kingdom." Lancelot didn't take part in the battle since it would have been overkill to have him there. If they did send him, however, he would have been able to finish the job properly. He loathed the ones who held him back. It was their fault that one of them survived. That demon accomplice is right under my nose. I must eliminate her. Only then could he be satisfied. He heard that she was a very powerful swordsman. Although, that didn't scare him in the slightest. As long as his goddess continued being by his side, there was no adversary he couldn't face. How did the Paladin Corps respond to this? They are indifferent towards the matter. They say that it's baseless rumors. What are you thinking, Alitus? We cannot allow a demon's accomplice from slipping away. Well, I do not need your help. I will handle this myself. He might not have been a man chosen by the goddess like that paladin named Alitus who carried the Sanctity Knight shield. However, he was powerful enough in his own right. I feel ashamed of this jealousy I still carry for him. Alitus has the role of a paladin. That meant that he was the guard of the oracle of the goddess, a young woman Angelica. Of course, this woman was the one he fell in love with. She was also his childhood friend. He was the one who was supposed to protect her, as he always had ever since they were children who lived in that abandoned church. Lord Lancelot? May I receive my orders? What shall I do? Ah, right. Gather all the priests we currently have. Should we not inform the Pope of this? Lancelot glared at the man. I cannot allow that. If you do that, then His Holiness will send one of those people from the warriors of the Word of God. This is my chance to make up for my past blunders. Even if the fault lie with the high officials who held him back, he was in the wrong for allowing them to even stop him from fighting in that war. Because of his inaction, many began to look down on him. Even though he was one of the most decorated inquisitors, some would always say bad things behind his back. Those snakes who were high officials managed to point the blame towards him in the end. That wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was what the Pope would think of these rumors going around of him. Lancelot was a man who not many could defeat. If he was part of that battle, then their problems would have faded away and no blood needed to be shed anymore. Their only obstacle left would be the greater demon. However, before that he had to get rid of the fallen princess first. Where did they see the woman? The castle city of Sir Marcus von Berkley. Lancelot's eyebrow twitched. It will be careless of us to simply walk into another nation's city. Especially if the lord of that city was a powerhouse of said nation. Surely he would not mind. It is too risky. If I suddenly kill a fugitive in his city, then public opinion towards us will shift. And not in a good way. Lancelot looked down with a troubled expression on his face. He stayed silent for a minute. That's it. Yes. You mentioned something about a masked warrior who was with her. Yes, I did. What about him? Did you get a good look at who he was? Did anything give it away? A family insignia or something? Unfortunately, there was no such thing on his person. The priest lowered his head apologetically. This is troublesome. If I can find him, then he can lead us to her. This is assuming he will cooperate. And if he doesn't, I will force it out of him. I am still an inquisitor before a high official, am I not? That is true. I find it troublesome, but I will have to use my beloved swords. Lancelot thought as he turned his chair to the right. He looked up at the wall behind him. There they were. The ultimate pride of an inquisitor was their weapons. And the weapons he had were two of the most treasured items of his nation. You'll use them. Isn't that a bit? I do not need your understanding, nor do I need your opinion. Lancelot said coldly. Eek. Yes. Praise and worship had been a symbol of peace and reverence towards the goddess they believed in. The two swords were usually kept inside the head church of the holy city. Whenever a paladin was knighted or a person was promoted to a higher position in the church, the Pope would choose either one of the swords to bless those people. Lancelot had gone through the same when he became a high official. That one moment of having contact with the sword sent shivers of joy into his spine. He wished to experience that feeling again. Lancelot's entire body shuddered when he took hold of the swords. It was like the holiness of the goddess was flowing through the swords. One was ash black in color with an ominous aura leaking out of it. The other sword was a golden sword with beautifully crafted ornaments embedded into its hilt. There was suspicion of the black sword being of demon origin, however, those rumors were just rumors in the end. It was common knowledge that a demon blade must have an evil will. Lancelot could feel none of that from the sword. All he felt was a powerful blade strong enough to break through any defense. I read somewhere that a demon sword only responds to malice and a person who has high amounts of negative karma. Surely only demons have such distorted infamy. I, on the other hand, have the purest of hearts. A mere sword cannot reject my will. Lancelot grabbed the sword which was still rejecting his grip. It was vibrating like crazy to leave his side. But since it was just a weapon, an object of killing, it could do only that. You will obey me. A golden aura covered the black demon sword. The ominous aura disappeared and was replaced by a golden-bladed weapon. It was now a replica of the other sword. A fake holy sword. One sword was of holy origin and the other was but a mask of divinity. Good. You now know your master. You're still here? Lancelot pointed his sword at the priest who was looking at him with admiration and fear at the same time. Do as I have ordered you to. I will go to the city myself and deal with that masked individual. At the same time, I will slay the demon princes. Right away. The priest quickly left the office that was bathed in killing intent. Please watch over me and help me slay that evil accomplice, Goddess Melis. Lancelot took a knee to the goddess statue as he put on his inquisitor mask. It was a ritual he did daily to prove his faith to the church and the watcher above the clouds. I will most certainly cleanse this continent of any and all evil. Lancelot stood up and sheathed the two swords behind his back and put on his coat. You will be my next prey, greater demon. Chapter 20. Luke opened up his eyes. Through the blowing curtains, a radiant and warm glow was shining into the room. Who opened up the windows? Luke lifted his upper body and looked around. Good morning, young Master Luke. A maid was seated on a chair at the foot of his bed. In her hand was a book which suggested that she had been sitting there for quite a while. Morning. Where's Miss Lauran? He didn't expect a new maid to replace her this soon. She will take the rest of the month off. All of us were informed of it last night by Lord Sebastian. Apparently she was experiencing some trauma from what happened. I see. I never got the chance to talk to her. When Lauran came to the castle, she immediately headed to the office. That was probably to ask permission to leave. After that she went to her room without interacting with anyone. Since she was the heir's maid, she had her own room instead of the servant quarters like all the other servants. She was using the guest room right next to Luke's current room. Luke had tried several times to call out to her, only to be ignored. He had been worried that something was wrong with her. Arnold never told him what happened when they found her, after all. She left early this morning and gave her duties to me. Please do not worry. I have been a maid for 4 years and I have an education as well. She noticed the unreadable expression on his face, mistaking it as him finding this situation unpleasant. I'm not worried about that. Will she be okay? According to the madam, Lauran's mental health isn't looking good at the moment. Her grace used magic and confirmed that Lauran isn't in the right state of mind. She was told to go see one of the family's doctors to get a full grasp of her situation. It'll be a while before she comes back. Hopefully, she can fulfill her duties once she does. The maid stood up and headed to the cabinet. She pulled out a shirt and shorts meant for Luke's clothing for today. Luke had stayed here before he was introduced to the rest of the family members, so he was quite familiar to how things worked and where his things were. He was given Arnold's old room, which was quite large for one person. It seems Master Luke is lively this morning. It is quite big. The maid chuckled when Luke got up. Her eyes were looking at his nether region. Ow! Luke hurriedly lowered his sweater to hide his morning wound. The girl shrugged as if it was a normal occurrence. It's not something to be embarrassed about. Plus, there's no need to hide it. I'm used to seeing those things by now. Really? Yes. Master Arnold would always walk around naked in the mornings. It's inevitable that some of us would see it dangling down there. I've done it with him twice by now, so this doesn't scare me. Anyway, will these clothes do? Why, yes. Luke was still blushing. He felt his crotch calm down after a while. The maid left after giving Luke the clothes. The maids would always insist on dressing him several times, but he'd keep refusing. He wasn't used to this whole noble routines yet. Showing someone his naked body was still too much to ask of him. Luke struggled to get his tie to sit right. It was tiresome having to wear such clothes every day. After a while, he managed to get it right. Well, almost. It was a little tight on his neck. Is this the schedule that was set up for me? Luke looked at a placard that was hanged up on his room's wall. On it were all the classes he had for the rest of the week. Math, history, business, sword technique — he read all the subjects that were listed and their timetables. Just looking at all of them, he could feel a headache coming. How am I supposed to learn all of these subjects in just a few years? Having been born in a poor village, Luke never had the chance to get a formal education. Claudia tried teaching him some basic things, however, that was as far as his education got. He could multiply and read somewhat. He spent most of his time helping the hunters' squad of his village. They were responsible for getting food for the village. That was how he learned to fight. Although his skills weren't exactly top tier, he could survive in a fight with an ORC at least. You're awake. An elderly man's voice spoke to him as he was looking at the chart. Mr. Sebastian. It was the old man who had the muscular body of a veteran knight. That was Luke's first impression of the head's butler. He had both the body and the eyes of a fighter. Luke knew that, out of all the warriors he had seen before, Sebastian and Marcus were the strongest. Please, it's just Sebastian. Yes. Sebas strode into the room with his hands behind his back. Maybe it was his years of service, but his gait was that of a perfect servant. His walking posture was both strong and elegant. Tell me, what food did you usually eat in the mornings? In the village, I mean. Sebas suddenly asked as he approached Luke and fixed his tie. Well, we usually eat wheat porridge. And during the day at lunchtime, I always make myself a steak sandwich. If there isn't steak, I settle with any other meat. Dinner. Luke, not knowing why he was asking these questions, answered. Miss Claudia usually makes stuff like stew, curry and soup. When there isn't enough for a meal, we just eat bread. I see. No wonder you look like this. Sebastian lifted Luke's arm and squeezed. It felt like he was squishing jelly arms. You have little muscle, weak stamina and even weaker endurance. How is it that you're the strongest in your village? Well, I guess the standards differ from yours and mine. Perhaps everyone, man and woman alike in that village, is just weak. Perhaps it was the environment you grew up in, Sebastian muttered. Why did you ask about what we usually eat? It is because I am in charge of your physical training. If I do not know my students' habits, then I cannot conduct a plan to improve your physical appearance. I must know what to change and what not to change. Although Luke ate his fill every day, it seemed that that wasn't enough to classify as healthy. Perhaps it was the foods he ate. How much protein-filled foods do you eat regularly? Once a week. Twice a week. On average, 2 times. Sebas frowned. No wonder your body looks like this. What exactly is wrong? Your hands are too soft. Like that of a maiden's. But not even Lady Anna has such soft hands, though. Sebas held one of Luke's hands. Your core is flabby and skinny. Next he placed his hand on Luke's stomach and rubbed it. And finally, your form is distorted. Sebas pushed Luke against his chest. The latter staggered back a few steps from that soft push. See? You are too weak. Try punching my core. Punch me in the core. Right here. Sebastian got into a ready stance. He tightened his core muscles, which was probably unnecessary. It was obvious why. Luke pulled back his right arm. Here. Goa. Luke landed a solid punch, however, it felt like he was punching a brick wall. Sebastian sighed in disappointment. Even Al could punch harder than that when he was younger. It will take a while for us to unlock your hidden potential. You mean? Luke's hand, which had punched a literal brick wall, calmed down somewhat. Yes. The golden aura you used to defeat Lord Arnold. I wouldn't say I defeated him. Luke smiled wryly. In any case, my objective is to force that aura out of you and make it your own. You can rest assured that these old hands can make you a fine warrior one day. A warrior fit to rule this city. Sebastian gestured towards the door. Please follow me. What's this? Luke's eyes widened when he saw the vast amounts of food on the dining table. There were even foods he had never seen before in his life. The inside of the dining room was filled with the delicious aromas of all sorts of exotic and unique dishes. All the food were meat dishes of the highest quality. There were many servants standing to the side of the dining room's wall. Luke had noticed that they were even more than the mansion's servants. The castle was bigger, so it was obvious that more personnel were needed. I have personally prepared these overnight. Please enjoy and tell me what you think. Sebastian pushed Luke towards a chair. Yum. Luke couldn't resist Sebastian's suggestion and only sat down. This is what you must eat every day. We must make sure you eat healthy. A warrior's might must be as big as his stomach. A warrior once taught me those words. Was there such a saying? Luke thought as he was given his utensils. Oh, right. Is Miss Flora up yet? Luke asked while cutting through one of the many meat dishes. Unfortunately, no. Sebas explained. It seems the young lady has not slept for days. Even though we tried calling many times, she continued sleeping. I feel that it is fine to let her rest for the whole day. While I do not know why young Master Al bought yet another slave, I will not inquire his reasons. Am I imagining it, or am I the only one having breakfast this morning? Luke gazed around the room. Besides him and Sebastian, there were 10 other servants idly standing by. The rest of the family cannot join ... When Sebas was about to speak, another person entered the dining room. He closed his mouth immediately when he saw her. Second Miss. Everyone bowed when Judith, the second wife, entered. She was wearing a red dress and her lipstick on her lips was the same color as her dress. Humph. She strode into the dining room and located a seat. Why is the table filled with this junk food? Judith said unpleasantly. When she saw Luke, whose mouth was filled with sauce, her face twisted. I apologize. I was under the impression that none of the family members will be joining him at the table. And why do you think that? You should have known that I and Jack were still here. Judith motioned for one of the servants to get rid of the dishes sitting by the section of the table she was heading towards. As the Duke has left on important business, the tasks required for each member of the family has increased significantly, so I assume the same would go for the second miss. Her Grace has not left the office since last night. Young Melina has left the castle to attend her classes. Miss Anna left to head to meet one of her contacts, and young Master Al is also preparing for something in his room. Sebastian listed all of the above to the fuming Judith. Plus, as the second miss did not dine with the family last night, I assumed the case to be the same this morning. You. Judith narrowed her eyes dangerously. You should know that, as a head butler, mistakes cannot be tolerated. The fact that you cannot do your job properly can cause your subordinates to look down on you. Had you asked for my input first, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, now would we? A smirk spread on Judith's face. Sebastian's expression contorted for a second. Although her words didn't warrant a reply from the dozen servants in the room, Luke could tell that they agreed with her words. Sebastian bowed. "Please forgive my tardiness." "Humph. Such tardiness is not expected from a head butler." After saying her bit, she snapped her fingers. "Bring my breakfast." "The usual. And be quick." She pointed at a random servant. "Why, yes." The person hurriedly left the room to head to the kitchen. "Is young Master Jack joining us this morning?" Sebastian asked. It was like her earlier remark didn't faze him at all. Perhaps it did and he just had an unbreakable will, Luke thought. "No. He is still in bed." "I see." Sebastian stepped back as if he had said what he needed to say. Judith also shifted her attention elsewhere. At Luke. "So, heir of the Berkley family, HM? How does it feel?" Luke swallowed the food he had in his mouth. "Well, I'm still getting used to being the young master of the household. It's my first time having such an important role." Luke laughed nervously even though it wasn't a joke. "Although I found some closure last night when I spoke to Miss Adriana, it'll be a while before I'm fully used to it." Luke smiled. Judith didn't miss that. "I see. And you wholeheartedly accept being the heir? Are you not afraid of the dangers you'll be exposed to?" At that moment, the air froze. The atmosphere, which was already uncomfortable, became more unbearable. One could hear a loud gulping sound. It was coming from Luke. "The dangers?" he asked as his pupils shook. Judith nodded with a small smile. "As the adopted son of a great noble, there are many things you must look out for. Even that bus, even Arnold had to always watch his back." It was a common worry for those at the top of the aristocracy. It didn't just concern heirs but heiresses as well. Gender did not matter in this world. Everyone was treated the same. Even killers kill indiscriminately. By far, 4 assassination attempts had been made. Of course, his father destroyed both the culprits and the culprits' families' lives. It was one of those rare times when he is out for blood. 2 involved direct contact, ambushes, while the other 2 were indirect contact, poison. When he was 7 years old and attended a party, he drank a glass of juice that had a very dangerous poison inside of it. We were convinced he'd die, however, his mother was able to save him using her magic. Then there was this case when he was 9 years old. He was stabbed while he was returning from a play date with one of his childhood friends. We are unsure of what happened to the assailant. His maid, Victoria, was the one who rushed him back home. We never found out what really happened besides what she said happened. Luke silently listened. Why was she telling him this? Was it to warn him of the possible dangers? Was it to scare him if he were to continue keeping the position of heir? Big Brother lived this harsh a life ever since he was a child. Luke had grown up in a loving atmosphere during his childhood. He couldn't say that he understood what Arnold went through as a child. "All I want you to know is that many would benefit from getting rid of our household. That includes any potential heirs." Poor little Arnold had to suffer just because he bore the name Berkley. Judith shut her mouth as if she had said what she wanted to say. A small cackle came out of her. Luke looked at Sebas. It was to confirm whether what she had said was true. Sebas nodded silently, a grave expression on his face. Luke suddenly lost his appetite. "Why the long face?" Judith asked with a smile as if she was oblivious to the fact that it was her words which caused the tension in the air. "Well, do not worry. We have learned from those days. Security in the city, as well as in this castle, has been increased significantly." I see. Luke couldn't help but notice how much his body was trembling. By the way, the second princess is expected to visit in 2 days, no? Judith looked at Sebastian. That is correct. He nodded. Will she stay this time, I wonder? Arnold won't be leaving anytime soon since Victoria has not informed us yet if they are done cleaning the Lord's mansion. It was a common fact that Olivia disliked Arnold. The few times that she had visited was out of consideration for her relationship with the family. She and Anna shared many common traits, so they got along very well. She considered Melina like a little sister and she loved chatting with Adriana. I will strive to keep Master Arnold away for the time being. Don't worry about that, Sebas. A voice came from the dining room's door. It was Arnold. He was dressed in rather shoddy attire which only commoners or poor nobles wore. Judith's face twisted in displeasure. Pardon. I mean, you don't need to find some excuse to keep me away. Arnold strode into the room and sat down on one of the chairs. His boots made a loud thumping noise as he walked the clean floor of the room. I'm going adventuring.